All right, welcome everybody to night 2 of our FileMaker sessions. Tonight I'm doing things a little bit differently. I'm hosting a small panel on Zoom to ask questions and things like that. If you'd like to participate in this panel going forward, please feel free to jump on the website and request that, and we'll add you to the future panels. So I'm going to go ahead and dive right in here. If you haven't already, you're going to want to download some supplementary files from the website. There's a LightRight file there, and if you don't have LightRight, there's a CSV there that you can download that has all of the information in it. It's going to be what we use later on in the class to get all of our incoming data in from LightRight. A couple quick housekeeping things. Last night, again, was night 1. If you didn't follow along with that one, if you're watching this video not live, I would recommend you do that one first so that you have a sense of what we're doing. We're going to be building tonight based off of that first file, that intro file that we started with last night. So that's important to know. I don't think there's any other housekeeping things. For those of you who are watching on YouTube, feel free to shout anything out in the chat, any questions you might have, and we will make sure to get to them. Just keep in mind there's a bit of a delay with that. Okay. So let's jump right in. So right away, we notice I've already done a couple of formatting changes. Your, I guess, homework for last night was to make your layouts a little bit prettier with field names. So I did that. I just kind of organized things a little bit. I put, condensed things a little bit, got some formatting done with bolding and making things a little bit bigger, just for fun there. Same thing on the instrument records, just kind of made the fields look a little bit nicer. So tonight, the first thing we're going to look at is some of these formatting options, both adding headers and footers, how to manipulate some of the appearance of some of these fields, excuse me. And we're going to be adding some buttons before we really dive in here. So again, to get into layout mode, to do that, I'm going to go to either View Layout Mode or Command L. Here we go. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit here for you as well, so you can see a little bit bigger. When I was watching it back today, I realized that last night some of this stuff was pretty small. So one thing you're going to look at right away, if you started to resize some of your fields and you notice there was a lot of extra white space in your fields, that's because by default, these fields have padding around them. We can adjust that padding here under the appearance, excuse me, under the appearance tab in your inspector, and it's all right here. So you change these to 0, change them to whatever you want. It's okay to leave a little bit in sometimes. I usually like to leave a little bit from the left, but sometimes by default, they're a little too aggressive in the padding that they add. So you can see how that moves it around. You can also then, of course, align your text left, right, center, and justify. And then you can also align your text to the top line, to the baseline, or to the center of that field. So those buttons are super important there. You can create styles. It's kind of similar to kind of think of it like CSS if you're familiar with web programming at all, or web design at all. You can't actually write CSS in FileMaker, but the concepts are kind of the same. I'm not going to go super in depth into that tonight. We'll probably do a whole session on that at some point in the future, but just know that that's an option for you. So if you do want to go ahead and create yourself some styles, there's lots of demos on that out on the internet that are not specific to lighting that you can look at and play with. So great. So we looked at padding. On my worknotes database, or excuse me, my worknotes one, there's a good example of that. I left a little padding on the left, but kind of took everything else away. I was going to make sure that those are centered vertically. Looks a lot better that way. And you can also notice I did a couple of other little things, like I rotated my text boxes. I added a little square here behind just to kind of give it a little highlight behind our channel information. Rotating things, unfortunately, is not super intuitive in FileMaker. That is going to be under Arrange and then Rotate, Option Command R there for that keyboard shortcut. And then each time you do it, it's going to rotate it another 90 degrees around its axis there. So kind of annoying, but is what it is. Okay, so let's go back into our instruments for a second and look at how this layout is laid out. You know, we've been working so far all in the body section. The body section being the area that contains information about our individual records. So remember we talked last night about how you have multiple records in a table. Each one of those records shows up in the body of my layout. If I go back into browse mode here, and you remember we have these view as buttons. we're currently looking in list mode so that we can see all of them. If we switch over to single record view here, form view, you see this body is still there, but there's only one of them. But either way, each record is contained in its own little body section. So go back into layout view here, and we can notice that we've got a couple of other sections that are available to us by default. We've got a header and we've got a footer. And you probably noticed as we were scrolling around, those things, just like a header and footer would in a normal document you're creating, those things stay pretty much pinned. So this can become super useful for things like column headings if you're trying to lay yourself out a nice spreadsheet kind of view, or for buttons that you're going to use all the time, which is what we're going to look at here, or just for informational text, the title of your application, for example. So let's start with just that. Let's put the title of our application right up here at the top. I'm going to click on my text tool and I'm going to make a text box, and I'm going to call this Notes database. You can call it whatever you'd like. And I'm going to make sure that's center aligned, just like that. And then of course you can drag these margins to make each section a little bit bigger. We played around with that a little bit last night as we were adjusting this body section. You see I even added a little line here just as a little delineator between records. But you can make them as big as you want. I'll make that a little bit bigger. I'm going to make this text a little bigger too. Let's say that's going to be a 25. Just like this. And you see, just like, again, like other programs, you get some smart guides. So it's really easy to align at center. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to copy paste that. And now I'm going to put the title of what I'm looking at. So this is my instrument records. Records. Make this a little bit smaller and maybe not bold. And again, you can create styles for these things, for these text boxes, so you can make sweeping changes to your entire solution. But we're not going to look at that tonight. So right there, we've got our header. If we go back into browse mode, we scroll around, we say, okay, it's starting to look like an actual usable program now, right? Go back into layout view again. And now I'm going to put some stuff down here in the footer. Maybe we put something like, or your name, or I'm going to put MW lighting down there. Of course, you could put a picture down there. You could do anything you want to kind of stylize it, make it look like your own. So great. So we've got that laid out. The next thing we want to start looking at is adding a couple of buttons to this layout. So before we start just adding buttons willy-nilly, we want to start thinking about some of the things that we want to be able to accomplish with those buttons. So here I've gone back into browse mode again. And okay, yesterday, we were using some of these FileMaker toolbar buttons a lot. We use the new button a lot. We use the delete button sometimes. We used the duplicate. There's no duplicate button, but we used the duplicate function. So why don't I create some buttons for those that will make it really quick and easy to add things to add records to my database. So to do that, I'm going to go to Command L, again, for layout. And then there's a couple of different ways you can do it. Of course, you can go to Insert Button, or on your toolbar here, the second one in, this is a button tool. So I'm going to click that button tool. And right here in my footer, because I usually like to have my adding and subtracting buttons in the footer, I'm going to drag and create a button. And so right away on our button setup, it's going to ask me for a button name. So we'll say new. Click away. There, we've got a little button. It's not doing anything yet. We haven't linked it to anything yet. We're going to get to that in a second. But we just want to create the things to start, create the buttons to start with at least. So double clicking on it allows you to edit things about it. Now, if you notice across the top, right above the text field here, there are a couple of different options. You can keep it as text. You can put a symbol there instead if you want, or you can do a symbol and text. And these next few buttons allow you to choose how that's laid out. So I'm going to do this one here, the second one from the right. It's going to be a symbol and text. And the symbol I choose is going to be the plus button. Boom, just like that. So now I've got a little new button there. And of course, new, usually that corresponds to some kind of a green color. So I'm going to fill that in with a light green. Now, because I've already got this kind of the way I want it, we learned about this yesterday a little bit with our fields. There's no point in me using the button tool again. I'm just going to copy paste this button. You notice when I did that, it made this a little bit bigger. Undo that. I'm going to align it where I want it. And then I'm just going to change change what it says, because I don't have to worry about doing a whole, I don't have to create it from scratch again. Let's see, what's a good duplicate? I'm just going to use this for today. You can also import custom symbols into there if you want to. By clicking the add button, you can add all kinds of little things. I've got little gobos, I've got an EOS console, I've got a follow spot, all that kind of stuff that you can add into this default library that you have. So for duplicate, let's make that, oh, maybe make that orange. And then of course we want a delete button. And that's going to be our negative or minus sign here. I'm going to call that delete. And we're going to make that a nice R26. That's more of a salmon. Let's go. Well, let's stay in the same kind of pastel world. We'll go with that. Okay. So now when I go back into browse mode again, you see those buttons are right there. They're not going to go anywhere. They stay pinned to my footer because I added them to the footer. This is where it comes in handy. You want to make sure when you're creating these objects, and some of you who are moving around some of your fields yesterday probably noticed this, you want to make sure that the outer bounds of whatever object you're making, that it doesn't span across a break like that. So if I go back into browse mode here, you can see now it's put that delete button onto every single body. And that's not necessarily what I want. I don't want, especially with the delete button, I don't want to give myself a whole bunch of opportunities to delete things when I don't absolutely mean to. So I'm going to make sure that those are pinned down here to the bottom bar. And then what else could I do here? Obviously I can scroll. What if I add a next and last, or a next and previous and next buttons over on this side? So same thing again. I'm going to go, this time I'm just going to do a symbol. We're going to make it previous, maybe a little bit smaller. Put this one here, this way. Great. Now we've got some navigation buttons, and we'll make those, let's go kind of purple with those. Now that's ugly. Let's go, yeah, kind of a light blue. Now, the color choices, things like that you're making, of course, this all goes into a greater conversation about user interface and how you want the user interface to appear as you're doing it. You know, it's really easy to just come in here and start throwing buttons in and start doing stuff like that. I would encourage you, when you're planning out your solution, when we did that data planning that we talked about yesterday, also plan out what kind of buttons you're going to want and what color schemes they're going to use. One of the mistakes I made very early on in developing my solution was I just kept adding things and I didn't have an overarching style system. And so it took me a good month's worth of work one time to just go through and make sure there was a unified style to all my buttons, make sure text appeared in the same place, make sure all that stuff was like that so that people other than me could use the program easily. Okay, so we've got some buttons there. That's pretty good. Okay, so what else do we want to add to this? Let's go back into browse mode for a second. You know, we probably want to add those same buttons to our worknotes layout, but we're not going to do that quite yet. Let's see here. What else could I need? Actually, no, let's go ahead and move on. Let's move on from here. Are there any questions about any of this so far from anybody in Zoom or on YouTube? Great. Okay, so the next step is to go ahead and make these buttons do something. So in FileMaker, the way you make an object do something is typically done using a script. So scripts in FileMaker are relatively easy to write. At least in my mind, they're pretty easy to understand because they follow a linear flow. You basically you tell the program exactly what you want it to do in exactly the order you want it to do it. Obviously, there's a lot of little nuances and stuff like that, like there are with any program. But I find it pretty easy to figure out. So the cool thing that was introduced, I don't remember when this was introduced, but in FileMaker, is you don't have to make a script for every single action that you want to run. If, for example, your button is only going to do one thing, you have the option to link that button to kind of like a one-off script or a script that doesn't exist in your scripts manager. So to do that, I'm going to double click on the new button here. And you see under action, it currently says do nothing. If I click on that, I can choose two different things, single step or perform a larger script. We're going to ignore the perform a larger script function for now, and we're just going to do a single step. So when I do that single step, a mini script editor here pops up. And what I can start to do Yours might not look exactly like mine, depending on how your color scheme is and stuff like that on your computer, but pretty much all the functions are the same. What I'm going to do is I'm going to choose this first step, and I'm going to start typing. And the first thing I know, this is going to create a new record, so I'm going to start typing the word new, and right away I have 3 options that appear to me: new file, new record, and new window. So I obviously want this to be a new record. I'm going to double click that, click OK, and that's all there is to it. I can do the exact same thing for my duplicate button here. Single step, start typing in duplicate, right there, duplicate record. And I'm going to do the same thing for the delete one. Single step, delete. Gotta be very careful which one you click here. Delete all records, you don't want that. So I'm going to delete record request. Now right away, this is something new. You've noticed it's given us another option to choose here. It says with dialog on. And if I click that, it turns from on and off. Basically what that's allowing me to do is give me one more error check before I delete a record. I typically, especially in a worknote database, something like that, I'm going to leave that dialog box on, and I'll show you why. So when I click OK, close this and go back into browse mode, if I come in here and I try to delete that record, it's going to ask me for sure, do you permanently want to delete that entire thing? If I had turned that dialog box off and clicked that delete button, that record would just be gone. And there's not really an undo function unless you code it into your app, which is way beyond what we are going to be covering in any of these sessions. So once you delete that record is pretty much gone, and you'd have to restore it from a previous backup. So I always like leaving that there. Now, the cool part about those 3 functions that we did so far is that those are universal to any layout or to any kind of record you're on. I'm not saying create a new instrument record. You know, if we go back, let me go back to the layout view again so you can look at this one more time. I'm not saying, none of this doesn't have any kind of context. It doesn't say only create a new instrument. I could copy paste this button into any of my layouts, and it's automatically going to know to create a new record on whatever table that layout corresponds to. So that's super, super powerful. That's why I say before we went in and added these buttons over to the worknotes database, I wanted to go ahead and give them functionality here. And we'll do the same thing here with these 2. This will be a single step. And we'll say previous. Now, this is one of those things that you just kind of have to start learning FileMaker, learning some of the nuances. So previous doesn't show up. What we actually want to do is go to record. And then again, just like with the delete, there's an option here to choose which way we want to go. So first and last, that's going to be the first in your record list. Last is going to be the very last one. Previous will be the one directly previous to the record you're on. And next will be the very next record. And then by calculation, we're not going to get into today, but it basically allows you to go to a specific record based on a calculation that you can perform. So we want this just to be a go to record previous. And we want this one to be a go to record next. So just like that, we now have navigation buttons and data addition and subtraction buttons right within our program. If I zoom out a little bit, let me zoom out. You can see that yellow bar that we added that yellow bar yesterday to show us our current record. You can see it moving around. And then of course, if we switch this over to a single record view and I click through, now it's giving me those single records as I go through. I could also add a first and a last button here so I could quickly jump around, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so what I want to do now is I want to take this stuff that I just did, my header and my footer, and I want to copy paste that over to my worknotes display. Excuse me, worknotes layout. So I'm just going to marquee select that, hold down Shift, select these other things, Command C to copy it, or right click and copy. And now when I'm in, FileMaker automatically remembers what view you're in between, browse and layout. So when I go over here and I switch to worknotes, I'm automatically going to be in that layout view, which is super great. I'm going to go ahead and make this a little bit bigger. I'm just going to paste. And you notice it kind of resized a little bit for me based on the geometry that my previous layout had. So I'm just going to fix that a little bit. And again, this is part of the planning. So right now I'm doing this all very rough. You can turn on rulers I would recommend, you plan out exactly how big each one of these layouts needs to be, do it pixel by pixel, et cetera, if you're trying to make a really in-depth solution. Okay, so now we go back to our browse view here again. You see when I click new, boom, it's given me a new work note. And if you notice those auto enter fields that we set up yesterday, that's automatically happening. It's given me a new node ID. It's giving me priority of normal with a status of active. Great. So I can come in here and I can start typing in some other information. So using my tab key, I can hit target ID 4, next tab. Let's say this is a work note from lighting designer to programmer. I guess production electrician. And this is make the lights better. Now, if you're doing the same thing and you're trying to use that tab button and you've noticed that it's jumping around on you. So when I hit tab, everything's kind of in the right order. But if it looks more like this, if you go into a field and as you hit tab, it's just kind of jumping all willy-nilly around your page, there's a really easy way to fix that. So in the layout editor, Command L, I'm going to go excuse me, to layouts and then set tab order. And now what I can do, if I clear all of these, I can double click and you notice these little fields are being numbered as I go. So I can set exactly what I want my tab order to be. This information over here, I never really want to get into, so I'm not going to assign any kind of tab value or any kind of tab index to that. I'm just going to say, okay. And now when I go in, everything goes exactly in the order I want it to, and it totally ignores these other fields that I don't want to be able to accidentally tab into. And yes, if you're wondering, those are pictures of my cats that I've added to the worknotes database. Great. Okay, so we've added our navigation buttons. We've added our plus and minus buttons. So the next thing we want to start doing is looking at how we can start finding and sorting this data to be useful for us in the heat of the moment in tech. Sure, having this whole list is great if I'm sitting there and trying to go item by item, but if I only want to see my focus notes, it can be kind of a pain to go through and scroll and find them. So of course, in FileMaker, we can find those things and have them shown to us automatically. Using the built-in FileMaker menu, the easiest thing to do is click the Find button, and you'll notice that every single one of these fields has a little magnifying glass in it. So now I can come in here and I can type in focus under type, hit enter, and now it's going to show me only the records that are of that type. And if we look at our little record explorer here, you see I've only got 2 records that I can go back and forth between, and it says 2 of 5 found. So to get back to all of them again, I want to hit the show all button. Of course, I can do that for any field that I want to search. So if I find status active, enter, it's going to show me, of course, all of them are active. Let's change this one to completed. Let's say we made our lights better. I'm not going to worry about that one anymore. And now I find completed, boom, there it is. So any of those fields you can search and you can quickly find things. We could do a similar thing over here on our instruments layout. Let's say I want to see only, let's say I only want to see lights that are R80. So I could type in R80 enter, and right there it's going to give me a found set that is only the records that have R80 in the color field. Great, makes sense. But that's kind of tedious, right? Now, of course, maybe in the instrument layout here, it's not as bad because I have a little bit more time to find specific things. But when I'm over here working in my work notes, I don't really want to spend the time to click find, come into status and say active and hit enter. That takes a lot of time. So instead, what I want to do is I want to create a button that will automatically find those records for me based on that text. So let's go ahead and do that together. I'm going to go back into layout mode. And instead of doing a single button for this, I'm going to use the button right next to that called a button bar. I just said button a lot of times in one sentence, but I'm going to use a button bar tool. And I'm going to drag a button bar here across the top of my window. And you notice you have a similar looking window that we had before here, has some options for you. Right now, you see there's 3 buttons in it. I can go back and forth between those buttons. And just like I did with a single button, I can make them images instead if I want to, or just text. And then I can link them to specific objects. So the first one, let's say this is going to be how we view our types. So this is these would be type buttons. So we have work, caps, 2. will be focus. And the third one will be plot. Great. So if I go back into browse mode, you see I click on those there. Of course, not doing anything because I haven't linked them to anything yet, but you get the idea of where we're going very quickly with this. You could also add, let's see, what other types do we have? We have programming. So I'm going to add a programming one. I double click on this bar again, and I just click the plus button. Boom, now I've got another one. I can say programming. Okay. And go back to my work. And we're going to do the same thing we did before here. We're going to do a single step. And this time, we're going to start typing in find. Now we've got a lot of options here to choose from. The one we're looking for is perform find. So perform find is basically doing the same thing as we were doing before when you were trying to, when you were typing in that data manually. So I'm going to double click on perform find. And now you see it's wanting more information. Click on the little gear icon here, and I'm going to tell it I want to specify exactly what I want to find. Ignore that. That was for me testing earlier. Okay, so when you do it for the first time, you'll probably get a little pop-up here that'll be blank. If there's anything in there already, click on it and hit delete. So this window is asking us to specify what our request is going to be. So this is the equivalent of saying, what are you typing into the find box? So I'm going to click new. And now I want to find records where the type, was it? Yes, type equals work. And I'm going to add that. And you can add other criteria here as well. But again, we're going to keep it simple. I'm going to click OK, OK, OK. Now, when I go back into layout or to browse mode here and I click work, boom, it's going to do that. And you see it's even highlighted it for me. Now, you can do that with individual buttons if you want. You could do conditional formatting. You can do all those kinds of things with individual buttons. But I find that the button bar is super easy to be able to quickly make those little selections happen. So we go back in. We're going to do the same thing again. Let me try something real quick. I'm going to see if I can copy paste this. You can do this in a script. I don't know if you can do it in a button or not. You cannot. So we just have to do it manually. So again, we're going to do perform find. But if we notice now when we specify, this is already here because it's kind of smart. It knows that we've already done that. So I'm going to edit that existing one. And I'm just going to change this over to be focus. And OK. And then the third one, single step. Perform find. And this one is programming. Change. OK. OK. If you have a keyboard with a numeric keypad on it, the enter key on your numeric keyboard is a really good and easy way to quickly move through a lot of these menus. So especially in a text field, if you use the return key on your regular part of your keyboard, it's going to insert a carriage return to a lot of things. But if you use the enter key on the number pad, it's going to commit whatever that thing is. For the most part, there's a couple of exceptions to that, but I'm doing my best to use the mouse for everything so you can see exactly where I'm clicking. Last one here is plot. Change. OK, OK, OK. Now when I go back into browse mode, boom, now I'm sorting automatically by these buttons. Pretty cool, right? Now wait a second. I'm kind of stuck. I can't see all of them again. Sure, I can click on this show all button, but if we were trying to get this all completely self-contained, basically what I want to do is come back in here and I want to add another one that is going to be, oops, I want to add another one that's going to be all. And that's going to be a single stepper. And the command for that is show all records. So the cool part about FileMaker scripting is it's, like I said, very intuitive. If you think of a button that you would use in the program, start typing that button and chances are you will find it there. There's also a search field here, all kinds of things you can search through to find the kinds of things you're looking for. But I find that if I have a question, I start typing and I see if it comes up. The FileMaker user forums are also just awesome. There are some really great like power users there, just like there are in the EOS groups. All kinds, you can find all kinds of questions and answers there for all kinds of things. Okay, so right there, Start going back and forth through this. I click on all. It's now showed me all my records. And if you notice, it's remembered what my current record is when I did that. So if I'm on 8 and I click on all, my current record selected still stays 8. Pretty cool. Great. So that's a quick and easy way to filter out types. Now, what about statuses? We could do the same thing if we wanted to. We could create another button bar and do that with status. We could do even the same thing with a from and a to. And basically any field we wanted to that we know the text that's going to always be there, we could make buttons for that. Actually, from and to is probably not the best example for that because that text could change. Like, again, we could add another person to this list. And so I don't want to have to add a button for every single time that happens. So in order to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a variable. And actually, I'm going to wait to show you that a little bit. I'm going to do a couple more things before we jump into that. So let's jump back over to our instrument records for a second before we jump into variables. So here, we want to create a couple of sort buttons. Oh, we didn't do sorting. That's exactly it. So we've done finds, but we haven't done sorts. So let's do sorting really quickly. I guess I should just, pay attention to my notes. That would probably be helpful. So I'm going to add a little text field here. It says show. Make that white. So this first button bar is going to show us things. And the next thing is going to be sort on this button bar. So we can sort by, let's say, by type, sort by status, sort by from, to, and ID. Of course, that would just be our numeric sort. Okay. So again, I'm using that same kind of idea before. I'm copy pasting an existing object and then editing that object so that I don't have to do the work of formatting it again. But now I just need to go in here and I need to change what these individual things are. So this is going to be sort records. And now it's going to ask you if you want a dialog, yes or no. I'm going to say no. I don't want a dialog to pop up. I just want it to do the sort. And then on the little gear icon here, I can choose to specify what order I want to sort things in. So it's going to automatically give me my current table. And let's see, we're working on our types right now. So I'm going to sort that by type. Keep records in sorted order. And I'm going to quickly pop through and do each one of these. Type, status, move. Okay. Notes from. Some of this can be a little tedious, but put some music on and it's really easy to just jump in and do it. So that little with dialog box you see me keep clicking no to. Basically, if that said yes, it would give us this options box each time. So I could actually choose what I wanted to sort by each time. So I could even perhaps add a custom sort button to this bar where it would give me a dialog if I wanted to. Totally up to you. And again, especially for those of you watching on YouTube, we've got about 11 right now. If you have any questions, throw them in the chat and I'll definitely get to them. Target ID, no, not target ID, node ID. Boom, boom. Okay, so now I'm going to click on show me all of them, sort by type. So now you see they're organized by type alphabetically. So this is where this is the first example of when the field data type that we set up before is going to come into play. If you try to sort a field that you have set as a text field numerically, it's going to do that thing you've probably seen before where it goes 1, 10, 11, 12, up to 19, and then 2, and then 21. If you're sorting by a field that's going to be a number, you want to make sure that when you set it up in your database, it's definitely a number. Sort by status, by from, by to, by ID. Boom. So we've got some sort buttons here. And again, this is basically the same as clicking the sort button and choosing those, the order you want them to be sorted by. So pretty cool. Okay, so that's kind of a pretty good start for pretty much all of the quick find manipulation that we need to do right away. You actually notice right here when I click on programming, it says no records match this criteria. I can just click cancel. Now, of course, I can through further scripting, I could change this text to make it say whatever I wanted to. We'll do that another time. And we'll leave this on all, sorted by ID. Let's go ahead and add some of these features over into our instruments, into our instruments table, or excuse me, layout as well. So what is probably the most useful thing is probably going to be sorting, right? I'm sometimes going to want to sort by channel. Sometimes I'm going to want to sort by purpose. Sometimes I'm going to want to sort by position. So I'm going to come back over to worknotes. And again, I'm just going to copy paste this because I've already done the work. Why do it twice? Oh, thank you. Lee just pointed out in my copy paste over here to worknotes, I never changed this to worknotes. Thank you, Lee. You win a prize of some kind, I'm sure. All right. I'm going to add this right here. Again, I don't care that this doesn't really match up what I have here. I'm just using this to quickly get these buttons here. So we'll go ahead and edit some of this stuff. We'll say channel. Next up, we'll say purpose. Position. And I'm actually just going to do those for now. I'm going to delete these other two. Just by channel, purpose, position. Obviously, we could spend time and make a sort for every single one of the things we want to. And I encourage you to do that because sometimes you do need that information, but I'm not going to waste everybody's time doing that today. So then I'm going to come in here again and I'm going to sort. And again, because I copy pasted this, I'm saving steps. I don't have to click as much every single time I do it. One thing I do need to do though is clear out what I had before. So I'm going to sort by channel. Okay. Sort by purpose. And sort by position. So, whoops. Position is the first time that we're going to find that we need to actually not just sort by position, but we have to kind of have a subsort within that of unit number. So I'm able to specify all that right here in this sort records dialog box. I can say position, and I can add a unit number underneath it. And then I can click on these individual things, and I can actually choose how I want those to be how I want those to be sorted individually within each thing. So right now it's going to sort by position first, and then by unit number going up. If I wanted to sort by unit number going down, I could do that. I could also reorder them. I could also do a custom sort. This custom sort comes in super handy when you're doing things like position, because of course, organizing your positions alphabetically doesn't necessarily correspond to how it will work on a instrument schedule. It's not the same layout we want. But for today's purposes, we're going to leave it as alphabetical. So I'm going to click OK. Click OK. And now we see got channel sort, purpose sort, and position sort. Of course, everything's on the same position, so it's kind of a bad example, but you see it's sorted by unit number. And these will come into play a little bit more later when we do our LightRight integration. Cool. So now let me circle back a little bit, and I'm going to talk about variables very briefly. We're going to cover variables a little bit more in depth tomorrow, but let's give an example of a use case here. Earlier when I was doing those finds, I said I want to click find and say anything that has R80 and click enter. Again, a lot of steps. Instead, what I can do is I could create a little button right next to the R80, and this is kind of similar to LightRight. When you're in LightRight and you click the little plus sign next to a field, it's going to show you all of the records that have that in that field. I'm going to do essentially the same thing with this. So I'm going to go into my layout view here. I'm going to make a new little button. I'm going to put it here by color. And this is just going to be a simple icon. I'm not going to do any text with it. And I'm going to come down here and find my magnifying glass. Just like that. Cool. So now I have a little button. Lovely. Great. So now this is the first time that we're going to have to write an actual script in order to make this button do something. And the reason for that is because I actually need it to do two separate actions. I need it to, number one, I need it to grab what the current color is on the current record. And then number two, I need it to use that information and find other records that have that color in them. So what I'm going to do is open up my script editor for the first time. You can do that by going to File, Manage Scripts, or Command-Shift-S. I'm going to resize it here so you can see. And this is probably what yours looks like to start. Absolutely an empty field here. So to start out, I'm going to click the plus sign, and you see a lot of things change right away. I've got a new script. I've got this kind of a similar layout to what we saw before in the single step creator that we were using before. I'm going to name this search for color. And of course, like any good data program, we want to have some organization to our thing. So I'm going to add some folders here. I'm going to say instrument finds. I'm going to move this inside of that folder. Even if you're doing a really simple solution, I recommend you start putting things in folders now, because as some of you have probably noticed, even in the 24 hours you've been doing this, your mind already starts to reel with all of the possibilities you have. And so if you keep yourself organized, I promise you'll be much happier later. So again, here's my script editor. Same thing as before. I can start typing. The first thing I want to do is I want to set a variable. Set variable, enter. And now I can choose what I want that variable to be. So this is asking me for a name. Now, variables can come in two different flavors in FileMaker. There's a local variable, and this is, of course, is explained right here. A local variable is used in the current script that you are working in. So you're going to use it once, and then it's going to go away. A global variable is going to be something that once it's committed, stays in your file until the next time you close it. So we're going to do some global variable stuff tomorrow when we start working on reports and layout printing and stuff like that. But for today, everything we're going to be doing is specific to our script. So we're going to use local variables. So a local is designated by a single $sign there. A global is $2. So I'm going to do a $, and I want to call this color. Sorry, I realize it's probably hard to see on your screens. I'm not going to try to change into light mode right now because I might crash Zoom or something like that. So I'll just highlight it so you can see what I'm doing. So I'm doing $, color, and that's setting a color variable. And now the value of that, we want FileMaker to go in and find whatever is in the color field on the current record that we're working with. So I could start typing that in here if I know the exact syntax, but it's a lot easier if I click on specify. And now we're seeing for the first time our calculation engine here. So this is going to be a very, very simple calculation. I'm just going to double click on color. And you see instruments, : color. That's going to tell me it's my instruments table, my color field. I click OK. I click OK. And you can ignore, there was a box here that says repetition. For now, please just ignore that box. OK, so we set our variable. That's our first step. I'm going to hit enter. That's going to give me another line. So again, this is why we couldn't do a single line script before. And now, just like we did in the previous ones, I'm going to perform a find. And I'm going to say specify find requests. And I'm going to do a new one, and I want to say find records where the color equals our variable. So it's equals $color. So we look at that. Oops. What did I do? Oh, I got to add it. There we go. So it's going to find records where instruments color equals our color variable. And again, as you're looking at this, think of this script linear or from the top down as a timeline. The things at the top are what it's going to do first. So the first thing it's going to do is set the variable, then it's going to perform the find. Simple as that. So I'm going to close my scripts window, make sure I save, and I'm going to come in here and I'm going to double click on my button that I added. And I'm going to now, instead of doing a single step, I'm going to tell it to perform a script. And I've now got my scripts list here, search for color. Going back into browse mode, I click that button, boom, it's now showed me everything that is R80. Pretty cool, right? Of course, show all again is needed to show everything back. Same thing for R04. Because it's when I click on that button, I'm clicking on the body of that individual record. And so it knows to find the text that is put inside of that field. Now, the cool thing about this is I could do this multiple times. And there's a couple of ways I could do this. I'm going to show you probably the most obvious way, which is to duplicate your screw. That's the wrong box. I apologize. I could come in here. I could copy paste this script and change it to search for, what am I on? Purpose. And then just change all this stuff here, right? Perform find, where instruments purpose equals purpose. Change. Okay, okay. Saving. And I can link that up. Oops. I can link that up here. So there you go. I mean, you see, you get the idea. You can create a script for every single one of those. And if you're just starting out and you're going to have a relatively simple solution, you can 100% create a small script for every single one of these finds that you're going to be doing, because you're not going to have a lot of them. There is a better way to do it where you can make a single script that will automatically that you can use, and it will be smart enough to know based on what you tell it what field you're searching for. I'm not going to cover that tonight. If you are interested in that, send me a message on the YouTube chat or on social media or something. Actually, do it on the YouTube chat or the Zoom chat, and I'll do it at the end of the session. I just don't want to take up time with the more advanced stuff right now when I still have some other stuff to cover, because I'm already running a little bit over my timeline here. Okay, let's look at my list. So we've done sorting, we've done finding. Obviously, you could create these buttons for all of this stuff. All right, I've got a couple people saying, yeah, that they'd be interested in that. So I will, at the end of the session, before I sign off, I'll show you how to do that the more complex script. Okay, what's next? Navigation between records. We did that. We did that. Okay, so yesterday we talked about, when we set up our database, we talked about how the relationships between our two tables worked. How every time there is every work note that exists has to correspond to a channel somewhere within my channel or my instrument records table. So I can do that. I can come in here, I can click work notes, I can create a new work note. But wouldn't it be really fast and easy if I could just click in this little portal here and I could go ahead and add a new work note without having to go and navigate back to that other field? And of course, the answer is yes. So in order to enable that to happen, I'm going to go back into my database editor, Command-Shift-D, or manage database. And I'm going to go back over to my relationships graph here. Now, you notice in this little branch that connects these two together, there's a little equal sign. I'm going to double click on that. And I've got a couple of additional options here. You can actually make more than one match field here. You can do other operators where you can say things don't match. You can do all that kind of stuff. But what we're going to be looking at specifically today is allowing creation of records in the worknotes table via this relationship. So now when I click on this button, I click OK and I click OK. All of a sudden, without really having to do much work, you notice there's an empty line in my portal here. If I start typing a note, as soon as I commit that note by going out of that field, boom, look, it's created it for me. It's given me an ID. It's already assigned those things that we said we wanted it to assign before. Really, really powerful. And if I come back over here to my work notes, I see, boom, there's number 9. It's there with the information I put in it. And again, because it's related, I already see all of that information about that channel over here. So super cool, right? So over here on the instruments layout, excuse me, yeah, it's really cool to be able to see all this stuff, but what if there was a photo attached to it? What if the text didn't all fit in this box? Well, let's use what we've learned about buttons to create a small script that will dump us over to the record, or to the work note that we want to be on. So I'm going to go back into my layout editor here. And I'm going to just copy paste again this button because it's already similar in size to what I want it to be. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit as well. to make sure it fits. It does. I'm just making sure it fits within this white record row here. And I can use my magnifying glass if I want. I'm going to make it like a little edit. So we say, all right, when I click this button, I want to edit that work note. And this, in the later versions of FileMaker, I believe this started with 16 or 17. So I think pretty much everybody who's watching this has those versions. We can actually do this with a single step script. So I'm going to do a single step. And that step is going to be go to related record. And it's going to ask me a couple of things here now. What table is my record on, and what layout do I want to go there on? So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say get related records from worknotes. And I want to show it using my worknotes layout. And I want it to open up in a new window. And I want to say this window is worknote edit. And maybe I say only show me that one related record. Animation doesn't necessarily do anything, I believe, on the computer version. That will only animate if you're on iOS. So we'll get into that another time. So again, now we look at this, we're going to the related record, showing only that related record from the table worknotes on the layout worknotes in a new window. So just like that, when I go back into browse mode, zoom back out a little bit. Say I want to look at number 6. I click that button. It's now opened another window for me, and it's highlighted 6. Now, of course, you're wondering, wait, why didn't it only showed me, it didn't show me just one? That's because I have a bunch of work notes associated with that one, but it did highlight that. So if we find a work note, or if we find one that's only associated with one channel, for example, boom, there we go. There it is. Now, of course, if I look back up here again, I could leave this window open, click on all, use my buttons that I have, and automatically be right back to where I was, which is pretty cool. Actually, that's two really important buttons we should add real quick are buttons to switch between our views. So let's do work notes, single step, go to layout, work notes. And I'm going to copy that, go to work notes, put it here, instruments, go to layout, instruments, boom. So now what I did is I basically just gave myself a button to quickly pop back and forth between those two windows. And of course, you're going to want to get that to line up a little bit better and color code it, et cetera, et cetera. But okay, cool. We talked about that. We talked about all of that. I think the last thing for today, or two things I want to talk about actually. First one is going to be LightRight. So we've got about 10 minutes left or so. I think we can get through this in that time. I'm going to open up LightRight really quickly here. And let me go back into the right display. And I've got a show file here with a lot of records in it. This is from a production of Matilda that I was going to do in Houston right as quarantine started. So this LightRight file is available on the website for these courses. If you do not have LightRight, there is also a CSV available for you that you can download as well. So I like to use LightRight when I'm creating my plots. I use it as a plugin for Vectorworks, essentially is the way I like to describe it. It allows me to manipulate a lot of data at once, but once I get that data done, I move it over into FileMaker because I find that I'm able to do more with that and format it the way I want to in FileMaker. That was kind of the start of this entire project for me when I first got into it, was wanting to be able to have more control over what my paperwork looked like, and I wanted it to be able to relate to other pieces of paperwork as well. So in LightRight, I'm going to go ahead and export this information as a CSV. So to do that, I'm going to File, Export Data, Data. And now I find it easier. Typically, when you come in here the first time, all of these fields are going to be checked. I usually do none, and then I come in here and choose only the things that I want. So I'm going to choose the things that I know I created, fields for yesterday. Let's see, we also had focus status. Here's that LightRight ID field we talked about. Very important that you include LightRight ID, DMX number, universe, We don't need any of these combo fields. Again, you choose whichever fields you set up for yourself in your solution. Maybe you're using all the user fields. Maybe you're not. Totally up to you. I want it to be comma separated. It doesn't really matter how I sort the data because I'm going to resort it once I get into FileMaker. I want to make sure that exporting field labels as the first record is selected. What that allows me to do is, as I'm pulling things in, it allows me to quickly match up what data is supposed to go into what fields. I don't want channel parentheses, so I'm going to click on strip channel parentheses. And again, that has to do with the fact that channels are numbers for the most part, and so I don't want any other extraneous characters in those fields. Then I like to use plain wattages because it makes it a little easier to see and do math. So, and it gives you an example there. 1.2 kilowatt or kilowatts becomes 1200. All the other stuff don't really need to do anything with. I do not like to do fill blank fields with because it can mess up some of your finds. So if you're trying to, for example, to find an empty field, some of them might have the dash, some don't. I just leave that unchecked. So I'm going to do export the data. It's going to ask me where I want to export it. I've already done it, so I'm just going to click cancel, but I exported it as export.csv. And once I do that, LightRight will ask me if I want to automate that. And I'm going to say, yes, I do. I want to save this as FileMaker. And now, once I've done that, I don't have to go in and redo that finding of the data process anymore. I can come into File, Automated, and click on FileMaker. And now it will automatically just ask me where I want to save that data. So super duper handy. It takes that like 20-click operation down to a 3-click operation, makes it really fast. Okay, so now I'm going to come back in here into FileMaker. I'm going to minimize LightRight because I don't need it anymore. And I'm going to start, I'm probably just need to start by deleting these dummy records we made. We don't need these anymore. They were great while they lasted, but we want to have actual records in our show now. So I can delete them one by one using our delete buttons, of course. Yes, I want to delete. I can do it with these buttons. Or I can go to Records, Delete All Records. Now, when you use the Delete All Records button, that will correspond again to whatever table you're currently working in. So you don't have to worry. It's not going to go in and delete every single record on every single table, but you do need to be aware of what table you're currently manipulating before you click the button. So I'm going to go Records, Delete All Records. And now you see I have got no instrument records left in my file. Great, that's the way I want it. I could click a new, I could do it manually, but I'm going to import that LightRight information instead. So to do that, I'm going to go to File, Import Records, choose a file, and then I'm going to navigate to wherever I saved that CSV. So for me, it's here in this FileMaker folder. I'm going to say 1.2 export. I'm going to click Open. And now my import window has popped up for me. Since this is the very first time we've done this, we want to make sure that we're adding new files, or excuse me, adding new records. Later on in the process, we'll be able to do things like updating or replacing, but for now we just want to add. So I'm going to choose Add, and then I'm going to look here. I've got a little data explorer that I can go record by record and see exactly what is in all of those things. It's also asking me what kind of data is included in those individual records. So when I come back here to the first one, you see, wait, these are my field names. This isn't actual data. 2, this is actual data. So I'm going to specify that that row number 1 is my field names. And when I do that, you see all of these things pop up here right away. But wait a second, look at this. Some of these match up, but other ones don't. Circuit name does not match up with focus, et cetera, et cetera. I can change the order to be matching names, and it will automatically find matching names between my CSV and my fields that I've set up within FileMaker. So this goes back to what I talked about yesterday about how important it is, especially if you're planning on using LightRight as your data source, to make your field names match up exactly. Sometime down the road, months from now, when we do a EOS, we try to bring in EOS information, this becomes even more important because there's like 30 different fields that EOS exports. Great. So when it does that, I've got that all lined up. We'll make sure it's set to comma. I click import, and it's going to give me a little summary here. Added 443 records. Boom, there they are. Of course, they're all in whatever order they were specified in LightRight before. So I'm going to say sort by channel. And there we go. We've got a whole bunch of records in this database now. Very useful to start building with. Of course, if you don't want to have all of these, you can go through and make your own or just have a couple. I'm going to delete these first two follow spots because they don't have any real information associated with them. Okay, so the last thing I'm going to show you today before I do that advanced script thing for the people who ask for it is how to do a subheader on this. So right now, yes, we have this header that's always there. And when we're sorted by channel, that makes sense. But when I sort by something like purpose or position, I might want to see exactly what position I'm looking at as I'm scrolling through these records. So I'm going to go back into Layout View. And if we notice again over here, we have our header, our body, and our footer parts. I'm going to right click anywhere in the off screen space. And I'm going to go to Part Setup. And now I'm going to be able to create a new part. I'm going to make this a sub-summary. A sub-summary when sorted by, and we'll say position. So basically what this is saying is the sub-summary will only show up when you've sorted your records by position, which is awesome. And we're going to say, we're just going to leave all those unchecked. And then when we click OK, it's going to ask us if we want it to be above or below the records, and we want it to be above. So now if you notice in our layout view here, now we have a new little bar that's going across here with no information in it right now. So I'm going to copy paste my position field into this bar like that. And let's make it nice and big. We got some padding issues there. Get rid of all that padding. And let's maybe make it, we'll highlight it just so we really see it, make it bold for now. So now, when I go back into my layout view, sorted by channel, or excuse me, my browse view, sorted by channel, nothing shows up. But as soon as I sort by position, watch what's happened as I start to scroll through. You see those position headers start showing up in my print or in my report. Or in my, excuse me, in my layout. So right away, you can see how that can become useful, especially when we go in tomorrow into starting to print PDFs and stuff like that. And of course, we could go in and we could actually create as many of those as we wanted to. Whoops, we could actually come into undo. We could go to part setup. We could create another sub-summary when sorted by purpose. Now again, when I sort by channel, it doesn't show up. When I sort by purpose, that field's going to start showing up. It's kind of hard to see with all of these records and because I don't have it formatted very well. But we could do a very similar thing on our worknotes database where when you sort it by type, it's going to give you a header for what type you're currently looking in as you're doing that. So super, super powerful. Okay, so that is it for the main content today. Tomorrow, we're going to be talking about creating printable layouts. Right now, if you tried to print this, it would be quite a mess and use a whole lot of ink or toner. So we're going to create some printable reports. We're going to show you how to export those reports as PDFs. We're going to talk a little bit more in depth about variables. We're going to use variables in a little bit more of a sophisticated way to manipulate our data. And finally, if we get to it, we're going to talk about how you can automatically email your PDFs directly from FileMaker, or as a way to, or you can tell FileMaker to automatically attach it to an email. So pretty cool stuff. So check that out tomorrow, same time, same place. If you do want to participate in the Zoom part of the call tomorrow, you are welcome to do that. Just sign up on my website. Okay, so real quick, I'm going to show you this kind of more advanced way of doing this, and you're going to have to bear with me because I might make a mistake since I didn't actually plan on doing this. I didn't rehearse today. But what we were talking about before is we have got these two scripts right now that are basically doing the same thing for two different fields, and we want to try to combine those down into one script. So what I'm going to do is, let's see, how do I want to explain this? Well, let's do this first. Let's go on to our instrument layout. And I'm going to go into layout view and I'm going to double click on that button. Now you notice something here that I didn't really cover before when I talked about, we specify which script we want it to be. You'll notice there's a button here or a box here that says optional script parameter. What this allows us to do is pass along a piece of text or a number or any kind of a parameter along into that script based on whatever button I've clicked. So what I'm going to do, for example, here is I'm going to say do nothing. So it unlinks this. Will it unlink it? Maybe if I unclick from it. Form script. There we go. I'm going to, before I do that, I'm going to create a blank script here. I'm going to call this find by field. Put it right there. I'm going to save it. No information in it yet. I'm going to go ahead and link this button to find by field. And I'm going to specify a script parameter of color, because this button is near my color box. Great. And I'm going to do the same thing here for this one. I'm going to link that button. Oops. I'm going to link that button to my empty script, and I'm going to give this a purpose parameter. Great. So now again, what that's doing is when I click on this button, it's going to execute that script, but it's going to tell the script, hey, I've got a parameter that you might want to know about, and that parameter is color, that parameter is position, or for example, that parameter is gobo. We'll make 3. That's a good good number for this. Just like that. Lovely. Of course, when I click on them now, they're not actually doing anything because I don't have anything in those scripts or in that script. So first thing I'm going to do here is I want to start taking in that information and figuring out what that parameter is. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say set variable. And I'm going to make a variable that is just search. Not search. Variable of search. And the value of that variable, remember before we just did a single field here. Instead now, I'm going to do a new calculation that says get script parameter. Boom, just like that. So now what's happening here is FileMaker is creating a new variable that is $search, and it's getting it based on that. It's creating it based on whatever that script parameter is that button I made is passing along to that script. Okay. So now let's debug this really quickly. I'm going to click on this little bug button here. If you don't have the bug button, you're going to want to go to FileMaker, Preferences, Use Advanced Tools. You will, I think, have to restart FileMaker, so maybe not do it right now if you're trying to follow along. But when I click on this little bug button, it's going to give me my script debugger. Oh, wait, actually, sorry. I don't want to click on the button. I want to go to Tools, Script Debugger. And now when I click on this button, it's going to call that script into this stack here, and I can click the next button. And you can see it's going to give me this, it's going to do that first field. And under my data viewer, I messed it up, sorry. I guess I shouldn't move things to the window I'm not sharing. That would probably make a lot more sense for you all, wouldn't it? I'm going to add I want to make sure that I'm watching search. So now this data viewer allows me to see the values as they come in this script. So I'm going to run the script again. Why is that not working? Please stand by. Oh, because I didn't specify the parameter for color. Boom. Trying again. Data viewer. Boom. Boom. Okay, I'm not 100% sure why that's not working, but I'm going to move on for now so you can see exactly how it's supposed to work. Okay, so I'm setting that variable as the script parameter. So now I'm going to start using some if then or if else if logic to start figuring out what I want to do. So I'm going to say if search equals color purpose, oops, forgot the ending quote. If search equals purpose, then I'm going to come back in here and I'm just going to copy paste this find. So now if search equals purpose, perform a find where again, purpose equals, let me think about this for a second. I'm sorry. Okay. So before I do that find, I need to go ahead and specify the variable just like we did before. So I actually want to copy both of these things in. Boom. So now if it's basically taking this and I've taken this script from before and I've put it inside of an if statement here, where if the search button, or if that search parameter, that script parameter is purpose, then it does this. I can say else if search equals color. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to copy paste these colors into here. Else if sorry, I was not super prepared for this, but hopefully it's making a little bit of sense. Variable gobo. Basically, I was able to copy paste the other ones, but because we didn't have a gobo before, I couldn't do that. So I'm just updating this. Great. So I'm going to save that script. And now, fingers crossed, zoom out a little bit. When I click on, let's say, R58, yeah, it did it. It found the 12 instruments in my show that used R58. So just like that. Purpose, back lav. Well, it's me the same thing, obviously. So let's show all again. How about, yeah, so it works, you get the idea. So if we look at this kind of in a top to bottom view, first thing we're doing is we're taking and we're setting our search variable that is based on whatever the script parameter that we passed through from our button is. And then it's basically evaluating and saying, all right, if search is purpose, if it's a purpose, then do these two things. If it's a color, then do these two things. If it's a gobo, then do these two things. Now, it's arguable this first step where I'm creating this other variable isn't super needed. I could actually say if get script parameter equals purpose, but for data simplicity's sake, I like to have it as a variable because it's a lot easier to see that in this list than if it said if, get script parameter, whatever. So define it here at the beginning and then use it throughout the rest of your script. Cool. So hopefully that makes some sense. And you can, of course, do that for every single one of them. I'm going to do it real quick for instrument type because that's a good example. Type. Oop. And now I'm just going to come in here and I'm going to copy paste all of this. Find where instrument type equals type. Change. Now you could actually even simplify this down a little bit more if you wanted to. If you used the, could you do that actually? No, you couldn't. This is about as simple as this could be, I believe. All right, so now we'll look at this purpose or instrument type, and now it's done it. Now, one thing that's important to note here, so we've got these types. If I were to then click like on R2006 here, it's going to show me everything first and then come back in and only show me the stuff there. So it's all going to be seamless, but it's not just going to show me the R2006 of that particular type. There are ways that we can do that, and I will get into that a little bit more in a future lesson when we talk more about instrument stuff. So great. So if there's no other questions, I'm going to go ahead and sign off. If you're on Zoom, you feel free to hang out for a second. I'm going to go ahead and cut the YouTube stream. I will index this video like I did yesterday's, and I will see you all tomorrow.